Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and delight to present the Golden Eddie Filmmaker of the Year Award to Mr. Paul Greengrass.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was very lovely. You always feel a bit tired when you watch a load of clips of your stuff. It kind of, you remember all the hard work. Well, thank you to the American Cinema editors for this beautiful trophy and the board of directors. And it's very humbling to be in a room full of so many editors, the custodians of so many directors' bare-ass bloopers and mistakes. It's quite humbling. I can still actually remember the first time that I ever went into a cutting room. It was 1978. And as Randy said, it was in the days when there were Steenbecks and plates and benches. And I worked for a television company in Britain called Granada, and they would hire a few lucky young people like me to come and get trained up as directors. And the chap who was in charge of training the directors was a director called John Slater, who British director who's now sadly no longer with us. And I was sent off down to his cutting room. I was going to help him on a documentary about the Munich air disaster where Manchester United football team in 1958, there was an airplane crash and a lot of young footballers were killed. And I was sent to this cutting room on the third floor. And he was a pretty forbidding fellow, terribly posh. And I was about 21 or something. And very nervous, and I went along to the cutting room, and there was a fug of cigarette smoke, because it's Britain, everybody smoked, particularly in cutting rooms. And he was there with the editor, Phil Hall. And I sort of knocked on the door and went in, and he said, "Yes, who are you?" And I said, "I'm Paul Greengrass. I've been assigned to you as a young grunt." He said, "Do you know anything about film?" And I said, "Well, I've only been here a couple of weeks, He said, "Have you ever touched any film?" I said, "Well, I've put film into a camera and stuff like that." So he said, "Well, go to the trim bin and pick some up." And there were about 3 or 4 trim bins full of film. So I went and got AA64A or whatever it was about 40 frames, a little piece like that, and went like this. And he said, "Well, no, more than that. So I went and got AA465, which was about 60 frames. And he got completely fed up, and he picked the bin up, emptied it out on the floor, and said, "Pick it up. That's the film, pick it up." So I started picking up rolls and rolls of trims in a huge thing. Then he tipped the other bin out, and then the other bin. So there I am with armfuls of film spewing out all over the place, looking like a complete idiot. And he said, "You've just had your first lesson, I'm going to lunch." It's a true story. And he walked out, and Phil said, "He's totally fucking mad, but you're totally all right in here, I'll look after you." And there began my relationship with film editors and the cutting room. Because it's the safest place for any director. But there was a logic to John Slater's undoubted madness, and he was a brilliant teacher. And the logic was that film is unruly, and you have to have a physical relationship with it. You have to struggle with it because film finds its own shape. It spews all over the place. You can't hold it as you might want to. And that's the paradox. Film is an unruly animal, and you cannot master it, and yet you must be the master of it, and it must be controlled. And in that paradox is filmmaking. The film will speak to you, and you must listen carefully. It will tell you what it wants to be, but also you must tell the film what you want it to be and make it as you need it to be. And those two forces, that push and pull, is what filmmaking is, and that is ultimately the process that takes place in a cutting room. And I've been very, very blessed in my life to work with a lot of wonderful editors who've helped me on my journey to really make sense of the training that I had, the world that I began with, which was documentary filmmaking, British documentary filmmaking, a very rich and vibrant tradition that goes back to John Grierson, goes back to the earliest days of cinema, where the idea was that you were to use the camera to show the world in action. That was the purpose of filming. That's what I was taught as a young man. You were to take your camera, you were to go out into the world, and you were to come back with something of what was happening, and that was your job. How do you balance that with fictional filmmaking, where you control everything, where it is all fictive, all constructed? That's really been my journey, and the editors that I've worked with a lot, Eddie Mansell, Roland Coburn, Clive Maltby, Claire Douglas in Britain, have helped me on that journey. And none more so than my dear, dear friend, Christopher Rouse. We met in Berlin, I think in about 2003. We've made, I think, 6 films now together. And it's been, I think, like all relationships between directors and editors, a marriage. We sit there and look at the screen, and he talks about the Clippers, and I talk about Crystal Palace, and both teams lose all the time, and that's okay. And then he might say, I think we need to take 3 frames off that bit, and then we'll watch a bit more. Maybe 2, maybe 4. And together you go on a journey. And Warren is right. Film editors, and there are so many great film editors in this room tonight, are authors. They're filmmakers. They are at the heart of the process. And Chris is certainly that. And every film that we've made together I've been lucky enough to have that powerful sensibility, that intellect, that storytelling instinct, that musicality, and that sheer will. So that when I phone up and say, you know that complicated sequence we had planned today? I only got 1 shot. Will it be okay? He'll say, it'll be fine. you know, if this movie scores a minus 24 in the test screening next week, do you think I'll ever work again? He'll say it'll be fine. That is the relationship between the director and the film editor, between Chris and myself. It's part psychotherapy, part artistry, and you're in search of making sense of the great paradox of filmmaking. How do you tell the film what it wants to be and listen to the film when it tells you how it needs to be? And so on behalf of all the editors that I've ever worked with, and especially Chris, and on behalf of all the actors who I've ever worked with, I thank you all, and I thank the American Cinema Artists.